So Dungeons & Dragons dropped on Rotten Tomatoes with what they say here a near perfect 92%. It actually dropped with 100%. It has now dropped even further than 92%. This is to be expected. It's kind of everything that always happens. This film's a lot longer than I thought. It's actually 2 hours, 14 minutes. It's now sitting at 85% with 20 reviews. Not bad. Not bad at all. The reviews coming in are pretty decent. We'll take a look at that in a minute. But one of the things which a lot of people have pointed to that I just didn't bother covering because I just didn't think it was an issue, quite frankly, is this as a headline. Dungeons & Dragons movie intentionally emasculates its leading men. Basically. A lot of people had a real problem with this. The Dungeons & Dragons movie writing team revealed they intentionally emasculated the leading men in the film and put the women on the front lines. Now, let's take a look at the real quote and we'll sort of gather my sort of personal thoughts on that. And then we'll take a look at the reviews. Because I don't see this as an issue. I think for comedic sake, emasculation happens, right? So, the Dungeons & Dragons writing team, John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein, revealed they intentionally emasculate the film's leading men, though not for wokeness. They're pretty self-aware people. Now, a load of people will just go, well, I'm a cynic. Of course it's for wokeness. They're just telling you that so you don't, think that it's wokeness. I get that, but let's take a look. While speaking with Variety, Daly and Goldstein discussed how Michelle Rodriguez's Holger, the Barbarian, and Sophia Lillis's Dory the Druid tend to engage in the front lines of battle compared to their male party members. That was not an attempt at wokeness on our part, Goldstein said. Daly elaborated, saying, swear to God it wasn't. We liked that Holger is the bruiser that does the dirty work for Edgin. And he doesn't like to get his hands dirty. We also love emasculating leading men. Okay, so what's the issue there? Well, the D&D's movies' male heroes aren't always heroic. So after reiterating the reasons they did not pertain to woke thinking, the pair explained that they wrote the men that way because they find it funny and fresh, pointing to the Rachel McAdams and Jason Bateman's character Date Night, which Daly and Goldstein also wrote. They also aimed to do something similar with Tom Holland's Peter Parker and Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark in Spider-Man Homecoming. We like our male heroes to be challenged and not simply heroic. So there's kind of a point to that. Again, I know loads of people would take issue with this. I get it. I get it a lot. But in fairness, you're talking about comedy, right? You're talking about comedy. So there are heroic elements to these individuals. They don't have to be always on the front lines. This isn't a action movie. This is Dungeons & Dragons movie. And it's also primarily a comedy. And you have your leading men servicing that comedy nicely. And emasculation can come in many forms. They're talking about emasculating the men on a comedic element, which I think is perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable. I don't actually see the issue with that at all. It's not one of those things where you're like, oh, well, they're putting people down. Emasculation, dependent on what your terminology is for, being a masculine person, can come in many, 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 many forms. And I don't think this is one of those ones where it's to be... I just don't see the issue. I think it's pure comedy and that's fine. But let's take a look. Right, because the reviews are coming in now. And they say this film is a celebration of comedy and character. While the characters are not too deep, Honor Among Thieves delivers a thrilling fantasy adventure that, though long, never wanes in its enjoyment. And that's the thing. This is a really long-ass film. 2 hours, 14 minutes. But it is a comedy. And, the emasculation of leading men from a comedic standpoint works. It's fine. It happens in most comedies. That does happen. You have to have someone as the butt of a joke. And this does happen. It has happened. It's not just now in this modern era. I think people are so desensitized by the modern era that they think that this is the only way films have ever been now, currently. And it's all for woke reasons, which I understand. I get it. But there were many films that came out before and they have, had men be the punchline and it's worked and it's been fine. So Charm is the Keyword in Honor Among Thieves, despite what the narrative stakes explain, it's a low-risk romp meant to entertain, and it delivers. So the negative ones, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves has a delightful cast on their hands, with a script that features too much plotting and problems for it to enchant a spell on any viewer. The film often feels like it's faking what the creators love about the game instead of trying to translate it from one medium to another. So loads of people don't really like that, but never mind. So Reggie Jean Page's deadpan delivery matches Chris Pine in every measure, making his scenes stand out as the funniest in the film. And so that's the other thing. This is an example. Reggie Jean Page's deadpan delivery and Chris Pine on the comedic timing. That's not emasculation, but the writers are obviously looking at that and going, well, we're having the women lead in terms of the action elements and the fighting, even though very clearly you can see that the men fight in the trailer. They don't not fight, we can see that. But they are leading the comedy elements. And as Amy Schumer is any evidence of, I'd much prefer guys leading comedy in this instance. This one's a certified crowd pleaser, even those among us who've never glimpsed a character sheet. The sure to be announced sequels may or may not be helmed by Daly and Goldstein themselves, but we shouldn't be surprised if they get wrapped up into the MCU machine anytime soon. With Dungeons & Dragons, they've given as good as an audition as any. Basically, loads of people really like this. Goldstein, the writers show off their ability to craft earned emotional moments. They set up nearly every gag, play with comedy, the rule of three, and even obey the loose law of the property. It even feels like an authentic quest. This is getting stellar reviews. And I understand the trepidation when you read headlines like this and you're reading elements. It's not an attempt to woke on our part, blah, blah, blah. I just don't see the issue. This is one of those things that's like a headline grabber. But it's not, to me, it's not an issue at all. Again, this is the actual interview that it's taken from. And they say lots of really good stuff, actually. Lots of really good stuff. Really, really, really good stuff. Talk about fantasy archetypes, setting up campaigns, critical roles, etc., etc. Low expectations. This is Hugh Grant. I hate all scripts pretty much, and I found myself amused and quite touched. I didn't want to put it down. It's incredibly accessible to the non-D&D. I hope. Christ, if it isn't, we're sunk. I mean, I don't think you have to know what an owlbear is to enjoy an owlbear. Again, comedy. This is good comedy stuff. But again, not really any issue here. Again, we'll kind of scroll through this. You can see they understand quite a lot of what needs to be done. They're fans of Monty Python. I just don't. I don't see what was so, what's so outrageous about having men be a punchline amongst other men. That's the thing you need to be aware of. It's not an emasculation when it's men being punchlines with other men. That's not an issue at all. So Dungeons & Dragons has been one of your texts of geekery for the past 50 years, so why do you think it's so hard to adapt it to a successful movie? Sometimes people take it too seriously and want to embrace the more dramatic elements to it. To us, that's ridiculous because you've got literally brains with four legs, creatures that were so obviously written with a wink. On the flip side, if you try to get too goofy, you're also doing it disservice. What we learned doing Spider-Man Homecoming was that while you have to have a certain reverence for and love of the source material, you can't let the weight of that thing hinder your creativity. And how do you shake that weight off with Dungeons & Dragons? It never left us with one. We had people looking over our shoulder from the brand, from the studio, even on set. We had advisors who said, well, she has to say something if she's going to do the spell because the spell has a verbal component. The good thing about working with D&D specifically is it's not like we're bound by the characters or pre-existing stories. We made up almost all the characters that are in here, which makes that is just D&D through and through. They're talking about each character represents different players and how they go about playing the game. Zenk, played by Reggie Jean Page, is very much the nerdy player that doesn't make jokes and adheres strictly to the rulebook, whereas Edgin, Chris Pine's character, is the more casual player. He doesn't bother to learn about the bardic spells and would prefer to just hit people over the head with his loot. This, great, no issue at all. The movie is almost like the Dungeon Master. The plot twists that we throw at our characters are what a DM would do at the table, just to screw with you and make it more fun.
you know. And that's basically it, you know. In terms of the whole, for woke, blah, 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 no, I don't. I'm looking forward to this a lot. I think this is going to be really good fun. And that's all I want from it. I just want it to be a good time with good IP to mine. And I think this is fun. Really, 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 yeah, a good time. And they say this, you know, in that vein, I was really struck in Honor Among Thieves that the lead female characters, Michelle Rodriguez-Holger and Sophia Lillis' Doric, are at the forefront of the action scenes and the men are often hanging back. That was not an attempt at wokeness on our part. Swear to God it wasn't. We liked that Holger is the bruiser that does the dirty work for Edgin, and he doesn't like to get his hands dirty. We also love emasculating leading men, not for woke reasons. Just because it's funny and fun and fresh. It was the dynamic we had with Rachel McAdams and Jason Bateman's character in Game Night. What's funny is that in our casting process on multiple films, we've met movie stars that you think are comfortable enough in their own skin that they would be able to portray themselves in a vulnerable light, but a lot of them really don't feel comfortable doing that. Obviously, we won't name here, but there is a notable movie star, I can think of two, who is so handsome and awesome and will not make himself look weak. That's so shocking because to me, that feels like the most fun that you could have as an actor. I think they love to do that, but when it comes down to it, they're not really willing to look foolish or less than. We've talked about this before with Chris Pine. What we love about Chris is that he's hyper aware of that and wants to make himself look as bad as possible, almost to a fault. Sometimes we're like, all right, no, you have to be the hero in this moment. This is fun. Good times. And I'm looking forward to it. I don't see the issue with any of this, so I thought I'd just address it here whilst we're talking about this. But I think this is going to be a good time. You know, this will lower down a little bit further, but 85%, not bad. Not too bad. I'll be going to watch this opening night, so let me know what you think down below. I'm sure, again, there'll be lots of people that disagree with me. I just think back to plenty of comedies. You know, plenty of comedies emasculate men, and it's not woke. I'd say give this a small chance. I think people will be pleasantly surprised. And you know what? If it comes out, and it is, in fairness, it is just full-blown wokery, I'll hold my hands up and I'll admit it. But cheers, guys. Take care.